I found my daughter sleeping in a borrowed van behind a gas station, with her little boy curled up beside her. That was the moment I realized how deeply I'd failed her and how far betrayal can go when you trust the wrong people. It was close to midnight when I saw the van. I had just gotten off the city bus, my knees aching the way they always did after dark. The doctor said it was arthritis. I said it was old age catching up to a stubborn man. Either way, I always stopped at that same gas station on the corner of Fulton Avenue to rest before the long walk back to my rented room. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you were listening in the comments. The lights there flickered like they were tired too. A yellow glow, buzzing softly, reflecting off cracked pavement and oil stains that never washed away. A few delivery vans were parked near the fence, engines quiet, like animals sleeping after a long day. That's when my eyes caught the green one. It wasn't running. No driver inside. Just sitting there, slightly tilted, like it had been parked in a hurry. Something made me look closer. Inside, a woman was slumped against the steering wheel, sleeping upright. Her head leaned against the glass, hair tangled, jacket pulled tight around her chest like she was trying to keep herself from falling apart. In the back seat, a small boy lay curled into a ball, clutching a faded stuffed bear with one missing eye. My chest tightened. I had seen homelessness before. The city was full of it. But there was something about the way she held her bag, arms wrapped around it like it was the last thing keeping her alive. I stood there longer than I should have. Then I recognized her face. My breath caught, so hard I thought I might fall. It was my daughter, Lena Whitmore, my only child. I hadn't seen her in almost 6 years. I walked closer, every step heavier than the last, my heart pounding louder than the hum of the gas station lights. The closer I got, the clearer it became. The slope of her nose, the curve of her jaw, the tiny scar near her eyebrow from when she fell off her bike as a girl. I raised my hand and tapped gently on the window. Once, twice. She stirred slowly, eyes unfocused at first, confused. Then she saw me. Her lips parted. "Dad!" Her voice cracked like glass under pressure. I opened the door. The smell inside was a mix of gasoline, sweat, and cold air that had no business touching a young mother and a child. She looked thinner than I remembered. Too thin. Her cheeks were hollow. Her hands trembled as she pushed herself upright. I swallowed hard. "Where's the apartment I paid for?" I asked quietly. "Where's the baby you just had?" "Lena, don't you have 2 children now?" Her eyes filled, but the tears didn't fall right away. They just sat there, trapped like they'd been waiting too long. "My husband," she whispered, "and his mother." She paused like saying their names hurt. "They changed the locks." My hands clenched. "They said I have no rights over my own daughter," she continued, her voice barely above the hum of the street. "They threw me and Noah out. They kept the baby." The boy in the back seat stirred, rubbing his eyes, confused by the sound of voices. He looked at me for a second, then dropped his gaze to the floor like he was afraid to be seen. That look shattered something in me. I climbed into the van, sat on the edge of the seat, and took in the truth I had been avoiding for years. My daughter was homeless. My grandson was sleeping in a car, and my granddaughter was being kept from her mother. "How long?" I asked. "A few weeks," she said. "This man who owns the van lets us stay here at night. I clean in the mornings. It's not enough for rent." I didn't ask why she hadn't called me. I already knew the answer. Because years ago, when she told me she wanted to marry a man I didn't trust, I said something unforgivable. I told her if she married him, she should forget she ever had a father. Those words had lived longer than I ever wanted them to. I looked at the boy again. He was thin, quiet, holding that torn bear like it was a shield against the world. "What's wrong with him?" I asked softly. "He has developmental delays," Lena said, brushing his hair back gently. "He's sensitive to noise. Needs therapy. That's why they hated him." That was it. Something inside me hardened. I opened the door wider and stepped back. "Get out," I said. She froze, fear flashing across her face. "Dad, where would we go?" I looked her straight in the eyes, the same way I used to when she was a child and afraid of the dark. "With me," I said. And then we make them answer for what they did. My rented place felt smaller than ever that night. It was a narrow unit on the edge of Brookline District, 2 flights up, with walls so thin you could hear the neighbors argue about dinner. The paint peeled near the ceiling, and the radiator hissed like it was tired of working past its prime. But it was warm. That was all that mattered. Lena sat on the floor with her back against the wall, knees pulled to her chest. Noah lay on the thin mattress I kept for guests, clutching his bear, breathing unevenly as sleep finally took him. He flinched every time a car passed outside, but exhaustion won. I handed my daughter a mug of sweet tea. "Drink," I said, "then tell me everything. From the beginning." She nodded, wrapping both hands around the cup like she needed the heat to stay grounded. "I met Victor during my last year of college," she began. "He was calm, polite, always said the right things. He drove a decent car. His mother adored him." I closed my eyes for a moment. I remembered that visit. Victor Whitmore had sat at my old dining table, smiling too much, eyes wandering over the furniture, the cabinets, the framed photos of my late wife. He brought pastries and spoke softly, but something in him never settled right in my gut. When I told Lena I didn't trust him, she fought me like I'd insulted her very existence. The argument ended with my worst mistake. "If you marry him," I shouted, "don't ever call me your father again." Those words had burned everything behind them. When we got married, Lena said quietly, "It didn't come. Only Mom did." She sat alone among Victor's family. I felt so small. My chest tightened. Not long after that, my wife passed. Cancer doesn't care about apologies or timing. I sold the house we'd built together and moved into the city, telling myself solitude was easier than regret. Then, 3 years later, Lena called. She was pregnant with Noah. Victor was struggling to come up with a down payment for a condo. Her voice shook the same way it did when she was little and scared of thunderstorms. I emptied my retirement fund. Every dollar I had saved from decades of construction work. The rest of my wife's inheritance. All of it. I wired it directly to Victor's account. The amount was well over $200,000. I kept the receipts. After that, Lena grew distant. Calls became rare. Messages went unanswered. I heard through others that she'd had another baby recently, but no one could tell me more. Until the van. When Noah was born, she continued, they changed. Victor started coming home late. His mother kept saying I was too soft. When the doctor said Noah had delays, everything fell apart. Her fingers trembled around the mug. They'd lock me in the bedroom during his tantrums so the neighbors wouldn't hear. They said a child like him ruins a family's reputation. My jaw clenched. And when the second baby came, she looked down. They said I wasn't stable anymore, that I cried too much, that I didn't deserve to raise her. Her voice cracked completely then. They took my phone, all my documents, said they'd handle everything. One day, they sent me to buy diapers with Noah. When I came back, the locks were changed. She swallowed. They told me if I caused a scene, they'd call the police and say I tried to kidnap my own child. Silence filled the room. I stared at the wall, seeing my late wife's face in my memory, hearing her voice telling me never to abandon our child. I reached for Lena's hand. "You didn't deserve any of this," I said. "And you're not alone anymore." She looked at me, eyes red, guilt layered beneath fear. "I didn't know how to find you," she whispered. "And I was ashamed. I thought you'd say I deserved it." I shook my head slowly. "That shame belongs to them," I said. "Not you." I stood, joints protesting, and walked to the closet. From a top shelf, I pulled down a battered cardboard box I hadn't opened since my wife died. Inside was a blue folder. Receipts, bank transfers, handwritten notes. At the bottom was a letter in my wife's handwriting. "If this money is ever used against Lena or her children, don't stay silent." My hand shook, not from age, but from resolve. "They think they're dealing with an old man who regrets too much to fight," I said quietly. "They're wrong." That night, sleep never came. Lena lay beside Noah on the mattress, one arm protectively draped over him, like she was afraid someone might steal him in his dreams. Every time he stirred, her eyes snapped open. I sat alone at the small kitchen table, the blue folder open in front of me. The receipts were still there. Yellowed, creased but undeniable. Wire transfers, dates, account numbers. Victor Whitmore's name printed cleanly across every page. More than $200,000. Half a lifetime of labor under the sun. Calloused hands. Missed birthdays. broken bones that healed crooked. All of it sitting inside a condo my daughter had been locked out of. I picked up my wife's letter again. Her handwriting was steady, confident. She had always been the brave one between us. If this money is ever used to hurt our daughter or her children, don't stay silent. I hear you, I whispered to the empty room. At dawn, Lena woke to the sound of boiling water. Dad, she said softly, you didn't sleep? I've slept enough for one lifetime, I replied. Come here. I slid the folder across the table. She flipped through the pages slowly. Her hands trembled when she saw her mother's letter. That's Mom, she whispered. Yes, I said. And this is proof. Her face fell again. But the condo is in Victor's name, she said. He has the documents. The law listens to paper. I leaned forward. Then we speak with paper too. I wasn't walking this road blind. There was a name that had lived quietly in the back of my mind for years. Samuel Cortez. We'd worked together on construction sites decades ago. He studied law at night, passed the bar in his 40s, and helped me navigate hospital paperwork when my wife was dying. I dug out an old notebook, fingers stiff as I dialed. The line rang several times. Then, Elijah, a familiar voice said, Is that really you? It's me, I replied. And I need help. I told him enough. Not everything, just the bones of it. By the time I finished, there was a long silence on the line. That's serious, Samuel finally said. Legally complicated. Emotionally ugly. Is there a path? I asked. Yes, he said slowly. But they won't play fair. They'll use her mental health. Her homelessness. The child's condition. I looked at Lena feeding Noah a slice of bread, smiling gently when he managed a small bite. We've already been quiet long enough, I said. Come by today. When I hung up, Lena looked terrified. A lawyer? She asked. What if Victor gets angry? What if they take Noah too? I knelt in front of her. How long do you want to live afraid? I asked. How long do you want your son to believe he's a burden? Tears streamed down her face. I don't want them to control us anymore, she said. Then we fight, I replied. Together. That afternoon, Samuel arrived with a worn briefcase and eyes sharp with concern. He read every page carefully. This is strong, he said. Not ownership proof, but leverage. Combined with custody abuse, it gives us ground. What's the first step? I asked. We confront them, he said, calmly, publicly, with witnesses. Lena's face drained of color. I'm not ready to see my baby and leave without her, she whispered. That's why we go, I said, gripping her hand. You're not alone anymore. For the first time since the gas station, I felt something different than guilt. I felt purpose. Standing in front of that building felt like standing before a wall I'd helped build and was now being told I had no right to touch. The condo tower rose over us with polished glass and silent confidence. Uniformed guards stood at the entrance like sentinels protecting something sacred. Cold air blew from inside every time the automatic doors slid open, carrying the scent of expensive cleaners and quiet privilege. Lena held Noah's hand tightly. He flinched at the sound of cars pulling in and out, pressing his palms against his ears. I scooped him up despite the ache in my arms. He wrapped himself around my neck immediately, like he knew this place was dangerous. Samuel adjusted his coat. Stay calm, he said. Let them be the ones to lose control. We stepped inside. The marble floor gleamed under soft lights. People moved through the lobby with purpose, faces clean, voices low. Everyone looked like they belonged. Except us. At the desk, Samuel spoke evenly. We're here to see Victor Whitmore. I'm his wife's legal counsel. The receptionist's expression flickered, recognition, then discomfort. She made a call. A few minutes later, the elevator doors slid open. Victor stepped out. Tailored jacket, polished shoes, hair perfectly styled. He smelled faintly of cologne and authority. His eyes locked on Lena. For a second, something like surprise crossed his face. Then irritation. Why are you here? He snapped. You're causing a scene. I stepped forward. This is your son, I said calmly. And this is your wife. He glanced at Noah like he was an inconvenience. You left, Victor said loudly. You abandoned the baby. Now you show up homeless and dramatic. Lena's hand shook. They changed the locks, she whispered. They took my daughter. Victor laughed softly. You hear that? he said to Samuel. She's confused again. That word, again, made my blood boil. Samuel handed him a business card. Mr. Whitmore, he said, we're here in good faith to discuss custody and financial matters related to the condo. Victor smirked. A lawyer, he said. Over what? A gift. Before Samuel could respond, another elevator opened. Out stepped Margaret Whitmore. Perfect hair, expensive bag, smile sharp enough to cut glass. She looked at Lena and curled her lip. So, she said, you finally got tired of wandering around with that child. My fist clenched. Samuel spoke quickly. Ma'am, please be mindful. Your words. Oh, spare me, she interrupted. We did what was best. That woman isn't well. People nearby slowed their steps. Heads turned. She cries all the time, Margaret continued. Talks to herself. A mother like that ruins a child. Noah whimpered and buried his face in my shoulder. Victor nodded. We have medical notes, he said. Postpartum issues. For the baby's safety, we had to separate them. That's a lie, I said loudly. You stole that child. The guard approached. Sir, he said, please lower your voice. Victor seized the moment. You see, he said calmly, they're disturbing the residents. This is exactly why my wife isn't fit. Lena collapsed inward, hands covering her ears as if she wanted to disappear. Please, she whispered. I just want to see her. The elevator doors closed behind Victor and Margaret as they walked away. The sound felt like a slap. Moments later, police arrived, called by the building staff. They listened politely, glanced at our worn clothes, our shaking hands. Family matter, one officer said. Handle it through the courts. We were escorted out. As the doors shut behind us, Lena broke down completely. We lost, she sobbed. I carried Noah outside, my legs trembling, but my mind clear. No, I said. That was only the beginning. The walk back from the condo felt longer than it should have. Lena cried quietly the entire bus ride. Her face turned toward the window so strangers wouldn't see. Noah stayed unusually still in my arms, exhausted from the noise and tension, his small fingers gripping my sleeve like an anchor. Samuel sat across from us, silent, eyes narrowed in thought. They're stronger in public, he said finally. More polished, more believable. Lena's voice trembled. So what do we do? She asked. Everyone believes them. Samuel leaned forward. We find the people who saw what really happened. The next morning, we went to the maternity clinic where Lena had given birth to her daughter. The building was modest, paint slightly faded, but it was clean and busy. The smell of disinfectant and warm air brought back memories of my wife's hospital stays, and my chest tightened. At the reception desk, Lena spoke softly. I gave birth here under the name Lena Whitmore, she said. Is there a nurse named Angela who worked the night shift? The receptionist typed for a moment, then looked up. She's still here, she said. I'll call her. A young woman in scrubs appeared moments later. She stopped short when she saw Lena. Oh my God, she said. I was wondering what happened to you. Lena's lips trembled. You remember me? How could I forget? Angela replied. That night was awful. We sat outside near a small courtyard, away from other patients. Angela listened as Lena told her story. As the words poured out, Angela's face hardened. I knew something was wrong, she said. Your husband argued about the cost of the room while you were in labor. He kept saying you didn't need comfort. She shook her head. And his mother, she continued. She complained loudly that your first child was different. She said it was embarrassing. Samuel exchanged a glance with me. Would you be willing to write that down? He asked gently. As a statement. Angela hesitated. I could get in trouble, she said. Lena looked at her with wet eyes. They took my baby, she whispered. Angela swallowed hard. I'll do it, she said. If I stay silent, I'm part of it. Hope stirred for the first time. Back home. Samuel nodded as he reviewed the written statement. This matters, he said. It shows intent, attitude, pattern. But one witness wasn't enough. Samuel tapped the table thoughtfully. We need someone who can speak about Noah, about how he's treated now. I knew exactly who. Mr. Hensley, the block coordinator in our neighborhood. Retired, observant, always sitting on his porch. When we told him the story, he didn't hesitate. I see that boy every day, he said. He's cared for. He's loved. If anyone says otherwise, they're lying. He agreed to testify. That night, Lena sat beside me, holding Noah while he slept. For the first time, she said softly, I don't feel invisible. I squeezed her hand. They made a mistake, I said. They underestimated how many people notice cruelty. The knock came in the early afternoon. 3 sharp raps against the door. I knew before I opened it that nothing good stood on the other side. 2 people waited outside. A woman holding a thick folder and a man wearing a vest marked with social services insignia. Behind them, slightly to the side, stood 2 uniformed police officers. Neutral faces, hands folded, observers more than participants. Is this the residence of Harold Whitmore? The woman asked. Yes, I replied. My stomach tightened. We've received a report regarding a minor with special needs, she said. We need to conduct a welfare check. Lena appeared behind me, Noah clinging to her leg instantly, his body stiffening at the unfamiliar voices. You're talking about my son, she said quickly. He's safe. He's loved. The social worker stepped inside, eyes scanning the room, clipboard ready. Our place was small, but clean. No trash, no broken furniture. Food on the counter, toys neatly stacked. Where's the child? The man asked. Noah pressed his face into Lena's skirt, hands flying to his ears. The woman frowned slightly. These behaviors can indicate distress, she said, writing something down. He's sensitive to noise, Lena said, her voice shaking. That's documented. The man crouched slightly, extending a hand. Hey there, buddy. Noah whimpered, rocking gently. I stepped forward. He doesn't respond well to strangers, I said. Please don't crowd him. The woman straightened. We may need to take him in temporarily for observation, she said. Just a few days. Lena gasped. No, she said. You can't take him. We aren't accusing anyone, the woman replied calmly. But the report states the mother is emotionally unstable and the environment is unsuitable. I knew exactly whose words those were. Before I could respond, a voice came from outside. What's going on here? Mr. Hensley stood at the doorway, arms crossed. I'm the block coordinator, he said, and I see this family every day. He stepped inside without being invited. That boy is cared for, he continued. If there were neglect, I'd be the first to report it. The social worker hesitated. The police officers exchanged glances. After a tense moment, the woman sighed. For now, the child stays, she said. But we'll follow up. When they left, Lena collapsed to the floor, shaking. They almost took him, she sobbed. I knelt beside her. That's their game, I said quietly. Fear and paperwork. That night, Samuel arrived with grim news. They filed for full custody, he said, of both children. Silence filled the room. They want everything, Lena whispered. And now, I said, gripping the table, they've crossed a line they can't come back from. After the visit from social services, the house felt different. Not unsafe, hunted. Lena barely slept. Every sound outside made her flinch. Noah refused to let go of her sleeve, even during the day. He followed her from room to room, terrified she might disappear the way his sister had. Samuel came by that evening, carrying the weight of too many cases on his shoulders. They're escalating, he said, which means they're scared. I looked up. Scared of what? Of losing control of the story, he replied. That's when Mr. Hensley spoke up. He had been sitting quietly on the edge of the chair, listening. There's something you should know, he said slowly. The day they kicked your daughter out of that condo, there was a scene in the hallway. Lena's head snapped up. What kind of scene? She asked. I work part-time with a maintenance crew downtown, he continued. One of the guards in that building told me management reviewed security footage that night. He said it was ugly. My heart started pounding. Footage? I repeated. Yes, Mr. Hensley said. Hallway cameras. Lobby cameras. Everything. Samuel leaned forward. Do you know if those recordings still exist? They usually keep backups for audits, Mr. Hensley replied, especially if there was a disturbance. The next morning, we went back to the condo building. This time, we didn't stand in the lobby like intruders. Samuel requested a meeting with management. They led us upstairs to a small office overlooking the parking structure. A man with glasses and a tired expression introduced himself as the building supervisor. I'm Martin, he said. What can I help you with? Samuel explained carefully. We're preparing a legal case, he said. We need to know whether hallway and lobby recordings from several weeks ago still exist. Martin frowned. Normally, footage is kept for about 1 month, he said, but incidents flagged during internal reviews are archived longer. He typed on his computer. The room went silent. Lena gripped my sleeve. After a long moment, Martin exhaled. The files aren't here, he said, but they were backed up to central storage due to an audit. My breath caught. So they still exist? I said. Yes, he replied. Most likely. Samuel nodded. We'll file a formal request through the court. Before we stood to leave, the door opened. A security guard stepped inside. Martin, he said, you wanted to see me? This is David, Martin said. He was on duty that night. David looked at Lena. His face softened. I remember, he said quietly. You were sitting on the floor outside the unit, holding your son, crying. Lena covered her mouth. Your husband and his mother were yelling from inside, David continued. They told you to leave. I asked them to calm down. The camera caught everything. My knees nearly gave out. Would you testify? Samuel asked gently. David hesitated. I don't want trouble, he said. Martin spoke firmly. If the court calls you, you go. That's not trouble. That's duty. David nodded. Yes, sir, he said. I'll tell the truth. On the bus ride home, Lena stared out the window, tears sliding silently down her face. They'll see, she whispered. They'll finally see I didn't abandon her. I squeezed her hand. The truth doesn't disappear, I said. It just waits for the right moment. And that moment was coming. Once Samuel confirmed the footage still existed, everything moved fast. Too fast for fear to keep up. The kitchen table became a war desk. Papers spread everywhere. Witness statements, therapy records, bank transfers. My wife's handwritten letter sat at the center like a quiet authority that refused to be ignored. This is a full custody and civil filing, Samuel said, flipping through the stack. Once it's submitted, there's no retreat. Lena swallowed. If we lose, she began. I cut her off gently. We've already lost everything once, I said. This time we fight for it. Samuel hesitated before speaking again. There are court fees, he said carefully. Administrative costs. Copying. Filing motions. I'm keeping my own fee low, but the system doesn't work for free. He named the amount. It felt like a punch to the chest. It was more than what remained in my savings. Lena's face crumpled. No, she said quickly. We can't do this. You've already given too much. I stood slowly and walked to the bedroom. From the drawer, I took out my wedding ring. The gold was worn thin from decades of work. I hadn't taken it off since the day I buried my wife. I placed it on the table. In this house, I said, we don't need it. Samuel looked up sharply. You're paid several months ahead on rent, he said. If you move, you might get part of it back. That's enough, I replied. Lena grabbed my arm. Dad, please, she begged. I don't want you living worse because of me. I looked her in the eyes. When you were born, I promised your mother I'd never let the world break you. I said, I failed once. I won't fail again. The landlord agreed to return half the unused rent. Neighbors bought what little furniture I sold. We moved to a smaller place down the alley. One room, low ceiling, thin walls. Noah looked around, confused. Home, he asked softly. Yes, I replied, kneeling beside him. Still home. Samuel filed the case the next morning. When the clerk stamped the documents, the sound echoed louder in my ears than any shout. That's it, Samuel said. They're officially being challenged. Lena exhaled shakily. There's no running now, she said. I nodded. And no more hiding. The courtroom smelled like old wood, dust, and nervous sweat, the kind of room where secrets have been dragged into the light for generations and left their residue behind. It wasn't a clean smell or a singular one. It was layered, stratified, like sediment pressed into the grain of the building itself. The air carried history in it, thick and unmoving, as though every argument ever spoken there had soaked into the walls and never fully left. Words had weight in places like this, and some of them never stopped echoing. You could feel it when you stepped inside. The faint pressure behind the eyes, the tightening in the chest. The echoes of voices long silenced lingered, faintly whispers of lives altered beyond repair, of verdicts that came too late or not at all, of people who had walked in hoping to be seen and walked out learning they never were. The room had learned restraint over time. It did not react. It absorbed. The walls were paneled in dark oak, scarred by time and silence. Up close, the surface told stories the way old skin does. Scratches ran faintly along the wood where rings had struck during heated testimony, where hands had clenched too tightly while waiting for a ruling. In some places, the polish had worn thin, dulled by decades of restless fingers and nervous pacing. The wood bore witness to promises broken under oath and truths revealed too late to undo their damage. It didn't judge. It remembered. Every bench creaked when someone shifted, the sound sharp and accusatory in the hush, as if the room itself disapproved of unnecessary movement. The benches were hard and narrow, designed for patience rather than comfort, for endurance rather than ease. People sat stiffly, knees angled forward, hands folded or clasped, learning very quickly that this was not a place that rewarded restlessness. Even breathing felt loud in a place like this. You inhaled carefully, exhaled quietly, afraid that drawing too much attention to yourself might somehow tip the balance, like the wrong breath could shatter something fragile. A ceiling fan rattled above us, slow and uneven, pushing warm air in lazy, ineffective circles. Each rotation came with a faint metallic groan, a tired complaint that echoed just enough to be noticed. It didn't cool anything. It only reminded you that time was passing, whether you were ready or not. Each turn of the blades, another second ticking away, another opportunity for the truth to either surface or be buried for good. Time had always been the enemy. It was time that had allowed lies to stretch out and settle uncomfortably. Time that had turned small cruelties into habits. Time that had convinced powerful people they would never have to explain themselves. Time that had forced Lena to learn patience the hard way, one sleepless night after another, one unanswered question after another. People filled the benches behind us, strangers, mostly. Faces I'd never seen before and would never see again. Some wore the detached expressions of people looking for distraction, drawn by the vague promise of drama and resolution. Others sat with stiff postures, eyes alert, because court had become a kind of routine for them, a grim fixture of their lives where nothing surprised them anymore. A few leaned forward, elbows on knees, sensing without knowing how that this morning mattered. They whispered in low tones, voices barely audible, leaning close as if the room itself might overhear them. Their eyes moved back and forth between the families seated on opposite sides of the aisle. They lingered longer than politeness allowed, studying posture, clothing, expressions, trying to decide who belonged to which story. There was an unspoken awareness in the room that this wasn't just paperwork or procedure. Something heavier hung in the air, something personal and raw and unresolved. None of them knew how much was riding on this room. None of them knew how many sleepless nights had preceded this moment, how many hours Lena had spent staring at the ceiling, listening to the quiet hum of a refrigerator or the distant sound of traffic, replaying conversations in her head, wondering if she'd said the wrong thing, done too much or not enough. None of them knew how many quiet breakdowns had happened in bathrooms with the door locked, in parked cars with the engine off, in the dead space between responsibilities where no one was watching. None of them knew how many whispered fears had been spoken into darkness, hoping anyone was listening. All of it had led here. Lena sat beside Samuel at the front bench, her posture rigid, spine straight in a way that had nothing to do with confidence and everything to do with survival. She sat like someone holding herself together by force alone, like every muscle was engaged in the same single task. Do not fall apart here. Her hands were folded tightly in her lap, fingers interlaced so hard her knuckles had gone pale, as if pain were preferable to release. If she loosened her grip even for a second, she feared she might come undone completely. She wore a simple blouse and a cardigan she'd borrowed. The fabric didn't quite fit her shoulders, the sleeves a little too long, but she hadn't complained. She'd barely noticed. Clothing had stopped being a priority months ago. Survival had taken its place. Her hair was pulled back neatly, smoothed into place with careful fingers that had shaken when she did it. No loose strands betrayed that tremor now. Her face was bare of makeup, not as a statement, not as defiance, but because she hadn't slept enough to care and didn't have the energy to pretend otherwise. She didn't try to look impressive. She tried to look real. Her eyes flicked once toward the door behind us, toward the empty space where her daughter should have been. The glance was instinctive, almost unconscious, like muscle memory asserting itself before logic could intervene. Like her body still expected her child to be returned to her any moment now. Like this had all been a terrible mistake that could still be corrected if the right person finally admitted it. I saw the way her jaw tightened after that glance, the way she swallowed hard and forced herself to look forward again. She didn't allow herself hope not yet. Hope had hurt her too many times already. Hope had a history of arriving early and leaving her alone with the consequences. Noah leaned against my leg, his small body warm and solid, a reminder of why we were here. His weight anchored me, pulled me back into the moment whenever my thoughts threatened to spiral. He hummed softly to himself, tuneless and repetitive, the same short melody looping over and over again. It was his way of coping when the world felt too loud or too unpredictable, when emotions filled a room faster than words could explain them. The sound was barely audible to anyone else, but I felt it vibrate through my bones. I rested a hand on his shoulder, grounding him, grounding myself. His humming slowed slightly under my touch, steadied by the contact, the way it always did. He didn't fully understand what today meant. He didn't know legal terms or custody laws or how fragile justice could be when money and power leaned on the scales. He didn't understand why adults spoke in careful sentences instead of saying what they meant. But he understood tension. He understood fear. He understood that something important was being decided without his permission, something that would shape his world whether he agreed with it or not. Across the aisle sat Victor Whitmore. He wore a tailored suit that probably cost more than everything Lena owned put together. The fabric was crisp, unwrinkled, untouched by stress. It was the kind of suit worn by men who believed the world bent quietly in their favor, who had never needed to ask twice for anything that mattered. The lines were sharp, intentional, designed to project authority without arrogance. His posture was straight, chin lifted slightly, hands folded calmly on the table in front of him. Not clenched, not restless, calm, controlled. He looked like someone waiting for a delayed flight, not a judgment. He looked like a man used to being believed. If someone didn't know better, they might have thought he was the one wrong, the one unfairly dragged into this room, the victim of a messy situation beneath him. He looked like someone who expected this to be handled efficiently, like a business inconvenience that would soon be resolved, so he could return to his real life. Beside him sat his mother, Margaret Whitmore. She was dressed sharply in a dark dress that hugged her frame just enough to suggest discipline and restraint. A pearl necklace rested perfectly at her collarbone, immaculate and symbolic, something inherited, something polished, something meant to communicate status without effort. The pearls caught the light faintly, each one identical, each one flawless. They were the kind of pearls that had never known hardship. Her gray hair was perfectly styled, not a strand out of place. Her chin was raised, lips pressed into a thin, displeased line. She looked less like a woman facing judgment and more like someone offended by the inconvenience of accountability. Margaret Whitmore had never believed consequences applied to her. She believed in order, in hierarchy, in the unspoken rule that some people existed to be obeyed and others to obey them. She believed money and influence were shields strong enough to deflect any real harm. Courts, to her, were formalities, places where people like her were inconvenienced, not corrected. She had spent a lifetime being deferred to. The judge entered. We stood. We sat. The bailiff called the case, his voice echoing slightly in the high-ceilinged room, and the sound seemed to seal the doors behind us, locking the past in and forcing the present to speak. And just like that, everything began. Victor's lawyer rose first. He was polished in the way men who had never doubted themselves often were. Confident, comfortable, the kind of man who moved through the world expecting doors to open before he reached them. His suit fit him perfectly, tailored not just to his body but to his station. His posture suggested ease, control, authority born of repetition rather than reflection. His voice carried easily, smooth and measured, trained to persuade without sounding like persuasion. It was the voice of someone who believed in systems because systems had always worked for him. He had never had to wonder whether truth alone would be enough. He never once looked directly at Lena as he spoke about her, referring to her instead as a concept, a liability, a problem to be managed. She is unstable, he said calmly, as if stating the weather. Emotionally volatile, unfit to provide a safe environment for a child. Lena's shoulders stiffened almost imperceptibly. He spoke about postpartum depression like it was a crime rather than an illness. He framed it as evidence of weakness, of danger, something contagious and threatening. He mentioned the visit from social services, the concern raised by the Whitmore family, the supposed risk to the child, shaping each fact just enough to distort it, sanding away context until only accusation remained. He spoke slowly, deliberately, leaving space between sentences, letting his words sink in, as if repetition alone could make lies settle into truth. She has already demonstrated an inability to cope, he continued. And my client's mother, Margaret Whitmore, acted only out of concern for her grandchild's welfare. Margaret nodded faintly, once, as if the lawyer were simply reading aloud what she'd already decided years ago. The lawyer painted a picture of Lena as fragile, erratic, a woman barely holding herself together. He suggested that Victor's absence was necessary. That separation was protection. That money and structure were more important than presence and love. That a child was safer with resources than with a mother who had dared to struggle. He never mentioned the yelling. He never mentioned the lock on the door. He never mentioned the night Lena sat on the floor outside her own home, holding her baby, begging to be let back in. When he finished, he sat down with a satisfied nod, folding his hands neatly on the table as if the matter were already decided. The room felt heavier, like the air itself had absorbed the weight of his words and refused to release it. Then Samuel stood. He didn't rush. He didn't puff himself up or perform for the room. He simply rose, straightened his jacket, and walked to the podium like a man who trusted facts more than theatrics, like someone who understood that truth didn't need decoration. He didn't raise his voice. "Your Honor," he said quietly, "we'd like to begin by correcting several misrepresentations." There was no anger in his tone, no performance, just certainty. He presented the medical records first. Clear, organized, undeniable. Records showing that Lena sought help voluntarily, that she recognized her symptoms and asked for support before anyone forced her hand, that she attended therapy consistently, that she followed every recommendation given to her, not because she was ordered to, but because she cared enough to try. Each document was placed into evidence carefully, respectfully, like something sacred, like proof of responsibility rather than failure. He handed over therapy notes, carefully redacted, and cited the counselor's professional assessment. The attending mental health professional stated explicitly, Samuel said, that forced separation from her infant would worsen her condition, not protect the child. Victor shifted slightly in his seat. Margaret's fingers tightened around her purse, the leather creaking faintly. Samuel continued, dismantling the narrative piece by piece. He explained the social services visit not as an intervention, but as a welfare check initiated by the Whitmore family without cause. He explained how no evidence of neglect or danger had been found, how the case was closed without recommendation. Each sentence was a brick removed from the wall Victor's lawyer had tried to build. Then came the witnesses. Angela, the nurse, was called first. She walked to the stand with steady steps, her scrubs replaced by a plain dress, her hair pulled back simply. She looked different out of uniform, but the steadiness remained. Her expression was firm, composed, not angry, not emotional, just honest. She didn't look at Victor or Margaret when she spoke. She looked at the judge. She spoke of the night Lena gave birth, of how long the labor was, of how Lena cried not just from pain, but from fear. She spoke of Victor arguing about money in the delivery room while his wife was in active labor, of him complaining about hospital bills while machines beeped around them, measuring life in numbers, of Margaret criticizing Lena's dramatics when her body was literally tearing itself open to bring life into the world. She spoke of the moment Margaret called Noah a shame, a mistake, a burden. The room shifted. Whispers rippled through the benches like a sudden breeze, disturbing still water. Margaret's face flushed red, her lips parting in protest, but she stayed seated, eyes sharp with indignation, as if she were the one being wronged. Angela's voice didn't waver. Next came Mr. Hensley. He adjusted his glasses nervously as he took the stand, hands folded in front of him like he wasn't used to speaking in places where every word mattered this much. His voice shook at first, then steadied as he continued, buoyed by the simple truth of what he was saying. "I see this family every day," he said. "I see that boy being walked to the park. I hear laughter through the walls. I see a mother who shows up." He paused, glancing briefly toward Lena and Noah, his eyes softening. "That boy is loved," he said firmly. "Anyone saying otherwise is lying." Something in the room softened. Not everyone, but enough. Then Samuel said the words that changed everything. "Your Honor," he said, "we request the court review the security footage." Margaret stiffened so abruptly it was almost visible from across the aisle. Victor's jaw tightened, a muscle jumping beneath his skin. The lights dimmed. The screen flickered to life. And there it was. Lena, sitting on the floor outside the condo door, her back pressed against the cold hallway wall. The hallway was stark, impersonal, the kind of place no one lingered unless they had nowhere else to go. Her hair was messy, her face pale and streaked with tears. She clutched Noah to her chest, rocking slightly, whispering something no one could hear, words meant only for him, promises she was trying desperately to keep. The timestamp glowed in the corner, indifferent, precise. Victor's voice echoed from inside the condo, sharp, angry, dismissive. The sound bounced off the walls, magnified by the recording, impossible to ignore. Margaret's voice followed. "Cold, clear, cruel. Leave," she said. "You don't belong here." A collective gasp filled the room. Someone covered their mouth. Margaret shot to her feet, shouting explanations, excuses about safety, about stress, about misunderstanding, but the judge raised his hand. "Enough." The word landed like a gavel in the chest. Silence slammed down like a door. The judge watched the rest of the footage without interruption. Every second played out. Every unanswered plea. Every moment of calculated cruelty preserved without commentary. When the lights came back on, the room felt different. Charged. Heavy with truth. The ruling came calmly. Custody of both children to Lena. Immediate return of her daughter. Financial compensation ordered for the funds used to purchase the condo. There was no flourish, no dramatics, just clarity. Victor stared at the table, his composure finally cracked, shoulders sagging as if something inside him had collapsed. For the first time, he looked small, not powerful, not untouchable, just exposed. Margaret looked around the room as if betrayed not by her actions, but by the world daring to hold her accountable. 7 days later, they brought the baby. Lena stood when she heard the knock, heart pounding so hard she thought she might collapse. Her knees nearly buckled beneath her. Her hands trembled as she opened the door. The moment she took her daughter into her arms, the sound that escaped her wasn't loud or dramatic, it was raw. A quiet, broken sob pulled from somewhere deep inside her chest, the release of months of fear, grief, rage, and longing finally allowed to surface. She pressed her face into her baby's hair, breathing her in like oxygen, like proof that she was real and here and safe. Noah stepped forward slowly, eyes wide, and reached out to touch his sister's tiny hand. She curled her fingers around his. Months passed. Life didn't become glamorous. It became peaceful. Victor lost the condo, lost his position, lost the quiet protection his name once provided. Doors stopped opening. Invitations stopped coming. The world didn't punish him loudly, it simply stopped accommodating him. Margaret rarely left her home. As for us, we ate simple meals. We laughed more. We slept without fear. One evening, after the kids were asleep, Lena looked at me and said softly, "If you hadn't stopped at that gas station." I shook my head. "No," I said, "if I hadn't learned when to fight." Family isn't about pride. It's about standing up when it matters. And sometimes justice waits not because it's slow, but because it wants the truth to be undeniable. Today, when I watch my grandchildren sleep under one roof, I understand something I learned too late. Evil often hides behind manners and paperwork, but love, when it finally stands up, is louder than both. If this story moved you, leave a comment. Tell me what you would have done in my place. And remember, protect your family before the world teaches you why you should have.